Welcome everyone to the Texocity Reddit Chats, presented by the 210 Culture Podcast. My name is Donna and I am your host. I am sounding like a man today because my throat do that little dangly dang, the swing in the back of my throat. Anyways, it's not Rona. I promise you 100,000%. I'm okay. I just got my flu shot. So I think it's the aftermath of it. This will be uploaded on Friday, the day before Halloween. So happy Halloween. You guys have a great and safe Halloween this year. It sucks because Rona fucked it all up, but we're going to make the best of it. If you are trick-or-treating, please be safe, wear your mask, sanitize, do all that shit, you know. I decided to do a story relating to Halloween on Reddit No Sleep, and this is by RichardSaxon, and the title is called "There Was a Reason Why My Neighbor's Halloween Decorations Always Looked So Realistic." I absolutely used to love Halloween, not only dressing up as my favorite scary character, making horror-themed food, or putting up decorations. No, I loved the atmosphere that filled our neighborhood as it changed from its boring demeanor into something horrifying and exciting. My neighbor and best friend Mark was an even bigger fanatic than myself. Each year, he tried to make the best costume or the scariest decoration. But despite our best efforts at becoming the Halloween kings, we could never match up to Mr. Black. Mr. Black was a man of advancing age. He'd been widowed about a decade earlier, left behind by a vicious, evil wife that treated the entire neighborhood like crap. The only thing she ever loved was Halloween, and she'd make damn sure all the attention was directed at herself each year on October 31st. When she died, I almost felt relieved for the poor man. Still, for reasons beyond my comprehension, he decided to keep his abusive wife's tradition alive. Each year, he'd come up with the most gruesome display of nightmare-inducing decoration. His entire house would be transformed into one of absolute mind-bending horror. He'd build a pool of blood in his garden, or he'd cover the entire house with cobwebs, unleashing a horde of spiders just to prove that he could. It was as beautiful as it was disgusting. How he constantly managed to outdo himself brought great joy to the rest of the neighborhood. Unfortunately, Mark couldn't stand it. Quote, "He's a damn attention seeker. Always has to be in the spotlight every fucking Halloween," unquote. For years, Mark had tried to outdo Mr. Black. He'd spent thousands of dollars in preparation, planning for months ahead of time, only to be blown out of the water by Mr. Black. What was even weirder was that each time it would only take Mr. Black a day to set up everything, which enraged Mark beyond anything else in life. In 2017, Mark even resorted to renting animatronics that resembled crawling corpses. He littered his house with the things, letting them scream and pull themselves around. He was so confident that year, and even as the 30th of October rolled around, Mr. Black still hadn't put up any decorations. When we went to work the next day, on Halloween itself, Mark was beyond himself with joy. He'd finally done it, and he just wouldn't shut up about it. It wasn't until we got home later that day before we saw the horrors taking place in Mr. Black's front yard. In the span of 8 hours, he turned it into a literal graveyard. Muffled screams were coming up from the ground, with bells that were attached to strings leading into buried coffins. They rang as people gathered around in awe from the sight. Those brave enough to traverse his yard were invited inside for a tour. Mark and I joined and quickly realized that Mark's pathetic animatronics were nothing in comparison, because inside the living room, Mr. Black had created a makeshift morgue, full on with mortuary refrigerators that rumbled around as if people were trapped inside. Mark was pissed. He couldn't believe it, and to be fair, neither could I. He swore then that he'd figure out how the hell Mr. Black managed to pull off these incredible feats each and every year at such an advancing age and without any help. Quote, how does he do it? Have you ever seen any trucks or workmen outside his house? Unquote, Mark asked. I chuckled. Nah, but come on, he's retired. He probably gets it done while we're at work. Still, Mark didn't believe it. That guy's up to something. Next year, I'm going to stay at home and figure it out. A year passed, and Mark actually remained true to his word. On the 31st of October, 2018, he called in sick to work. I sighed once I found out, surprised at how seriously he was taking it. Then, at around noon, I got a frantic and excited voice message from Mark. I knew it! I freaking knew it! You won't believe what I just found! Mr. Black is a depraved monster! I'm going to call the... The voice message was cut short, so I tried to call back. No response. After the fifth or so missed call, I started to get worried. There was absolutely no way Mark would have given me any peace if he truly found something. But no matter how many times I tried to call him, I just got a busy signal. By the end of the workday, I was truly scared for him. Mark was never that silent. I needed to figure out what was going on. As soon as I returned home, I went over to Mark's place, where I proceeded to hammer on his door. His wife was the one to answer, and she too seemed worried. Elise, is Mark here? She frowned. He went out to run some errands a few hours ago, but I haven't heard from him since. I thought maybe his phone died, but he should have been back home by now. Mark hadn't told her about his plan to investigate Mr. Black. Mostly because she would have been pissed, but I had to come clean. If he was truly missing, we needed to call the police. While Elise explained the situation to the cops, I went over to talk to Mr. Black myself. It was already getting late. Both children and adults had gathered in front of his house, ready for the yearly tour of horror. That year, his yard had been turned into a field of tall grass. It was so dense we could hardly see his front door. All we could see amid the field were makeshift scarecrows. Mr. Black hadn't let anything go to waste. As we entered his yard, the air filled with the stench of rotting flesh. It wasn't unusual for him to utilize all 5 senses, but this was extreme. Mr. Black, do you have a moment? I asked. In a minute, old friend, after the tour, he just shouted back as he led the people inside his home. I remained outside, disturbed by the odd smell. I moved some of the grass apart to inspect the scarecrows. They were horrifying, covered in old rags with bits and pieces of skin visible through the holes. They didn't even look like props. After a moment of hesitation, I reached out to pull off the scarecrow's mask. What I saw sent me falling to the ground in shock. The scarecrow wasn't a prop, nor a doll. It was an actual corpse. Oh God, was all I managed to get out as I stared at the decomposing body. Once I'd partially regained my senses, I started checking the other scarecrows. Most of them were beyond rotten, skeletal corpses that had perished long ago. But once I reached the last one, I immediately recognized the clothes. With a trembling hand, I reached to take off the mask. It was Mark. His throat had been slit, and he'd been turned into a flesh-filled scarecrow. I stood before the body of my former best friend in shock. All these years, Mr. Black had created what seemed like impossibly realistic decorations. It had all been real. The blood, the cadavers, the screaming, we'd all been oblivious to it. The police arrived shortly after, alerted by Mark's wife. They quickly stormed the house and escorted all the guests outside. But Mr. Black himself was gone. He was never seen again. I don't celebrate Halloween anymore, nor does anyone else in my neighborhood. For us, the 31st of October is just a painful memory of what we let happen under our noses. But if you see a new neighbor with decorations that just seem a tad too realistic, stay away from them. It might be Mr. Black. Dun dun dun. Ooh, that was a good story. It didn't get me all like shiver me timbers, but it was good. Wow. I would have been like, fuck this shit, I'm out. Fuck that. Ooh. I hope you guys like that story. Again, there was a reason why my neighbor's Halloween decorations always look so realistic, by RichardSaxon, and you can find it on Reddit No Sleep. And with that, my friends, that was the Texocity Reddit Chats. Unfortunately, this is the last one. The month of October is over. Anyways, with that being said, thank you so much for listening in. My name is Donna. I will see you guys next time. Bye.